Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Spade and Spoon Online. Today's episode is going to be all about preserving. So we've been super lucky at Springside and we've had a bumper harvest. Jane's just picked all the olives off our tree. We've got a couple of different varieties here. We've also got lots of jalapenos and chilies and tomatoes as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of different recipes and things that you can do with these so they don't go to waste. It should be a great episode. So our first recipe we're going to start off with is our green tomato chutney, a really great way to use up green tomatoes and unripe tomatoes. And we made it last year and we actually preferred it over the red chutney. Great with, we served it with sausage rolls, you could have it on ham sandwiches, really delicious. It's pretty simple. So a little bit of chopping to start off with, and then it's just going to pretty much cook in a pan for about an hour. The pressure points with it would be that as it starts to simmer down and reduce and get thicker, there is a risk of it burning. So you do need to pay quite close attention towards the last part of the cook and stir it quite frequently. But otherwise, the recipe itself is fairly simple. So the first things we need to add to our chutney is we're going to chop up our apples. I've got 2 apples here and 2 onions. Add those into the pot. I'm going to chop up these tomatoes as well. They're pretty small, so I'll probably just add the cherry tomatoes in whole. Any bigger ones I'll chop in half and I'll just discard the little green stalky bits. The other tricky thing, well, it's not really tricky, but something that's a little bit different is we're going to add in some mixed spice, but we're going to add it into a muslin bag. So this is just a piece of muslin. If you don't have this available, you can use like a clean Chuck's cloth as well, one that hasn't been used before. I'm just going to fold it over and I'm going to add in my mixed spice, and then I will tie it up with this elastic band, or you could use kitchen twine. And this will go into the pot as well. And at the end of it, I've just got to remember to fish it out. So it gives the flavor without sort of giving the graininess or the powderiness of the spice. If you don't have this, you could just add the mixed spice in. It's just more of a texture thing. It's still going to taste great. So I'll show you how this is done. I need 2 tablespoons. This does have holes in it, so you will lose a little bit out. That's okay. Oh, definitely 2 tablespoons there. Add a little bit more back in. It's messy, of course. So just bring it all together, the sides in, as best you can. And it's just a matter of tying it up. Like that, and popping it in, and don't forget to get this out at the end before you put it in your jars. So I've been chopping up all of my ingredients and I've just added them to my pot. So the bigger tomatoes I just halved, the other smaller ones I've just left whole, and I've got my apples and my onions in there and my mixed spice. So now I need to add in my vinegar and my sugar, which is going to help to preserve it and give it that flavour. So the recipe calls for demerara sugar. If you don't have this, you could use caster sugar or brown sugar as well. So 1 cup of that into the pot. And then the last ingredient is, actually second last because I need to add some salt as well, is 2.5 cups of malt vinegar. And same thing, if you don't have malt vinegar, you could substitute for another type of vinegar. This has just got a sort of a richer sort of flavour. Same with the sugar. I'm already feeling a little bit nervous about the size of my pot. We'll see how it goes. And 1/4. Okay, and then I need some salt. This is about 2 teaspoons, so I'll just use half of this. 2 teaspoons. All right, I'm going to put this on the stove. And while this is simmering away, we'll work on some other things. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is jars. So if you intend on storing your sauces and chutneys for a long period of time, you do need to sterilize them properly. If you're just going to keep them in the fridge, you just need to make sure they're been washed and clean and rinsed so you don't have a soapy taste. But if you intend on storing them, you need to sterilize them. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is you can chuck them in the dishwasher, hot cycle that gets hot enough that will sterilize them for you. The other thing that you can do is wash them and then put them into the oven. So I've washed these and I've done a variety of different sizes because it's really frustrating when you pour your chutney or sauce out and you've just got a small amount and you don't have the right, you've only got big jars left and then it won't seal properly. So different size jars, washed, cleaned, rinsed, put them on an oven tray so that they dry out, because if you're putting a tea towel in there and drying them, then you're introducing bacteria and fluff and bits and pieces that you don't want. So let them dry out and heat up in the oven. That way you're putting a hot liquid into a hot jar as well, and it's less likely to crack your jar. So I'd probably put these in about sort of 140 for at least 20 minutes until they're really hot, and you need to be careful handling these when you get them out. Today's episode definitely is one for the parents. Kids can help with the chopping and things, but really this is a one for adults to be able to get things out of the oven and to handle the hot liquid. You can cause some really nasty burns. So please make sure that you have a grown-up helping you with this if you are attempting this. So jars can go into the oven. And for the lids, I put the lids into a pot of water and I just boil these on the stove top, and they can just sort of boil for as long as you've got time to boil them for, at least sort of 15-20 minutes. Now with your jar lids, you need to make sure that they're in good shape. So if you've one of those people who uses a spoon to tap the lids off the jars, you're going to find that your lids are damaged and they're not going to create a nice vacuum seal. So what you're hoping for is when you open up your jar, it should pop. That vacuum seal needs to happen. That's when you know that you've sterilized your jar and sealed them correctly. So make sure your jar lids are rust-free, don't have any dents or anything, are in good shape. You can buy lids if you need to throw them out and get more. But always great idea to, these are just jars that I've used and I've washed and recycled. It saves going to the shop and buying new ones. So they're always handy to have a few jars around in your cupboard. So I'll get those sterilizing. That way, once my sauces are ready to go, I can add them in and it'll all happen all at the same time. So the next thing I'm going to work on is preserving some chilies. So we've got some jalapenos here, and I've got a couple of little, just small little capsicums from my tree that I'm going to throw in as well. We also had at school growing some smaller like Thai chilies as well. These ones are still green. I do have one red one in there. And I'm going to dry these out because I want to use these later on for our olives, and they're not going to store in the fridge because the olives are going to take a few months. But if I dry these chilies out, they're going to last a really long time. So a couple of ways you can dry chilies is you can put them outside, let the sun dry them out. That's probably the old school method. A faster way is to put them in the oven for on a really low heat and just let them dry out. And as soon as they kind of reach that sort of dryness, you can store them in a jar in a plastic bag sort of for ages. So I'm going to dry these to use these at a later stage. I'm going to show you how to make some really delicious pickled jalapenos. So pickled jalapenos are really easy to make actually. I made my first jar about a month ago, and you need to when you make a pickle or anything like that, you need to let it sit for a couple of weeks to let the flavors sort of develop. The longer you can leave it, the better tasting product you're going to have. But we've had this open for about 2 weeks and we've almost finished our jar. So lucky I've got plenty more to make. But when you're pickling, the basic ratio or combination of flavors you're going to have in there is vinegar, sugar and salt. And each of those three elements help with preserving. And that's why most pickled or things that are heavily sugared, like jam that's got a lot of sugar in, that's what helps to preserve it, or things that are dried out and salted. They're all natural preserving agents, which is a lot better than using chemicals. So into here, all I'm going to do is chop up my chilies and peppers. I'm going to add them into this saucepan, and in here I'm going to add vinegar, sugar, salt and water, and a couple of smashed up garlic cloves. Just want to get a close-up of these because the colours are so beautiful. Just make sure when you're chopping chilies to use gloves or to wash your hands really well, because you're going to know about it when you go to the toilet if you don't. That's all I'll say on that topic. So I've added in my vinegar, my water, my salt and my sugar. And I've got my garlic and chilies in there. I'm going to give it a little stir. And then it's so simple. All you need to do is bring it up to the boil, turn it off, leave it for 8 minutes. And then jar it. That's it. Really simple. This recipe is one that's going to be stored in the fridge, so I don't have to worry about sterilizing my jars. They just need to be clean. While this is cooking away, I'm going to check on my chutney. So this is simmering. It's been simmering for about 20 minutes. You can see those tomatoes are breaking down and releasing all their juices. It's still got a while to go though. It should end up being a lot thicker. So my green tomato chutney is almost ready, and I'm going to show you what the consistency should look like. I'm about to start work on making some tomato sauce or tomato ketchup. This recipe was given to me by a lady named Maria who runs a website called My Green Garden, which is worth a look. And I did a class with her and we made these really cute bottles of tomato ketchup, and it's really nice. It's got some spices in it. It's got some pepper, a little bit of chili, allspice, some cloves. Similar sort of ingredients as the other one with your vinegar and sugar. And it's got tomatoes, so I'm using 2.5 kilos of red tomatoes. Some apples in it as well. The apples give it a little bit of sweetness, and same with the onions. And this one's got a little bit of ginger and some garlic as well. So I'll start chopping that up and then I'll show you. So I've got a very busy stove top over here. I've got my jar lids boiling away. I've got my pickled jalapenos, which are ready to be jarred up now. And over here is my green tomato chutney, although it's not looking super green, I think because I had a few orange tomatoes in there. But it's starting to thicken up, and what will happen soon is it's going to start to make sort of like this plop, 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 a little bit like lava. You can see that it's happening, the bubbles are getting thicker, and this is where you really need to watch it now because it will start to stick to the bottom as it gets thicker, and that means that it's almost ready, but I don't want to burn it. And you can see here it is pretty easy to find that muslin cloth with the allspice. I've just got to remember to find it, but we're not too far away now. And in my oven I've got all my jars and they're sterilizing, ready to go. So the great thing with this recipe is that everything goes in the pot all together. You don't have to peel the apples, or you can just, if your tomatoes are big, you just halve them. But I threw the cherry tomatoes in whole. Everything goes in. We're going to dissolve the sugar first at a low temperature, then bring it up to the boil, and then simmer it for about an hour until it starts to thicken. And then at the end we'll blitz everything up with a stab blender. Over here you can see that this is the green tomato chutney, and the consistency has changed, and this is ready. It's starting to stick at the bottom, getting a bit sticky there, and it's quite thick now. It's almost jam-like. So we're ready to put that into the jars. Scoop them in, and I'm going to make sure that I get a garlic clove. Tricky. Garlic clove in there as well for each of them. And once I'm happy that I put enough of the chilies in there, then I'll top it up with the vinegar, the pickling liquid. So I filled the jars up, I've added the pickling liquid in there, and then I've just sealed them with the matching lid. Now these ones are not shelf stable, so they need to go in the fridge. And give them a couple of weeks for the flavours to develop as well. So put those to the side. Now onto our green tomato chutney. So this is the bit that you definitely need an adult for, because this liquid is super hot. It's been boiling on the stove for an hour, and the jars are hot as well. So you just want to, as carefully as you can without splashing it up on yourself and making too much of a mess, which I am. I'll even just spoon it in. Just going to fill up your jugs. Now you need you need to fill them all the way up, otherwise it will not create a vacuum seal. That's why it's good to have jars of different sizes on the go. So I fill these up, I put the lid on nice and tight, and it's secure, which is good. You need to be careful because it's really hot. The contents have heated up the jar even more so. The last thing that I like to do to make sure that it vacuum seals is to leave it upside down. That's why you want to make sure it's sealed correctly. So if you put it upside down like that, that helps to create the vacuum seal as well. All right, I'm going to keep going with my other tomato chutney, and I'll show you that when it's done. So this is the consistency you're looking for. It's still quite runny compared to the chutney, but this is going to be a sauce, so you don't want it as thick. I'm going to blitz this up now, so I'm going to turn it off the heat. I'm going to use my stick blender. You can use a normal blender, but you need to wait for the liquid to cool down to be able to do that. And then you'd have to heat it back up to put it in your hot jars to sterilize. So I'm going with the stab blender option. So there you have it, the finished product. Our tomato sauce, our green tomato chutney, and our pickled jalapenos. And the last thing that I like to do if you're going to give these away as gifts, because they make really lovely Christmas presents or birthday presents, is I collect little scraps of fabric off cuts and I save my elastic bands, and you can make some really cute little, I call them old lady covers on top. And then just put a little label on here with your ingredients and you've got a really beautiful homemade gift. Hope you've enjoyed and found this useful. We'll see you next time. Bye.